Oh, and here's one other piece. This is from Al Carroll. He's the author of President's Body Counts, the 12 worst and 4 best presidents based on how many lived or died. And this is basically, ranking presidents based on body counts. And he says the worst president ever was actually Nixon for what he did in Cambodia, which he says, what many argue was outright genocide. He ordered the carpet bombing and invasion of a neutral country for no reason other than to convince conservatives he was still tough on communism. At least 500,000 people were killed, and an additional 50,000 were outright executed in Cambodia by Nixon. So here are the 12 worst presidents that he ranks. Nixon, and now this was written before Trump was president. This was written a couple of years ago. Nixon, Reagan, Jackson, Buchanan, Polk, Fillmore, Clinton, Ford, Truman, McKinley, G.W. Bush, and Andrew Johnson. Those are the 12 worst, ranked by body counts. The 4 best: Lincoln, Van Buren, Carter, and Grant. And then there were 5 presidents who had high body counts, but they also did a bunch of good stuff: Jefferson, FDR, Lyndon Johnson, Bush Sr., and Obama. So for what it's worth, a fascinating thing. Martin in Atlanta. Martin, you wanted to weigh in on our vote here?
Yes, I do. And I want to say Harry Truman.
Because of the nuclear bombs he dropped in Japan?
No, that's up there. But the main thing is that following the death of Franklin Roosevelt, he did not pick up the gauntlet thrown down by Roosevelt to establish the Second Bill of Rights. This would have established as law of the land a well-paying job, or a living wage, health care, education, fair housing, all the things that we have real problems with today would have been established as U.S. law back in the 1940s. We would have had 40 years of that law by the time Reagan came around to try to undo everything. It would have been really hard to be where we are today if the previous few generations lived with health care and college and fair wage.
But Harry Truman did introduce legislation to establish a national health care system. He was the first to do that. And, it didn't even get a vote in Congress. The Congress, flipped Republican in the election of 46. And so 47, 48, you had a Republican Congress, and as I recall. And so, he was, and then he had the war in Korea, which just, crippled him. I mean, that's why Dwight Eisenhower became president. He ran on a platform of vote for peace, vote for Eisenhower, that he promised he would end the Korean War, which he did.
Well, it certainly was bad timing as far as the Korean War breaking out. But the main thing was the preoccupation with the anti-communism.
Yeah.
But going to the people. I mean, with Roosevelt's death, Roosevelt was a hero to the land, and it could have been taken to the people.
Yeah. Like LBJ did when Kennedy died, by the way. He used Kennedy's death to basically push through the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He finished the work of Kennedy, and I just think it's a real shame for us all today that Truman didn't put more effort into trying to establish the work of that.
Well, they did.
Laid out.
They did. The power brokers in the Democratic Party did choose the haberdasher from from wherever he was from, Missouri. Forget the town.
Yeah, that's actually
Independence,
because if they would have gone with the current vice president, with Roosevelt's vice president, he was very progressive on so many levels that.
Who's that?
Even today,
Wallace.
What was his name? Wallace.
Yeah, Henry Wallace was his president, his vice president in his 3rd term, and then Harry Truman in his 4th term. And had Henry Wallace, been vice president for his 4th term as well, which I think it was a huge mistake for them to. But it wasn't Roosevelt's choice. Roosevelt wanted Henry Wallace to stay on, but the power brokers in the Democratic Party just thought Wallace was way too left, and which is really tragic because he was just echoing Franklin Roosevelt. But they knew, that there was a very real possibility that the vice president would succeed the president. And they thought Harry Truman would be better for business, which is, just bizarre and tragic. Okay, Martin, your vote is recorded.
Which is where we are today with much of the Democratic Party, too. That's why we got to get the money out of politics and vote progressive Democrats in.
Amen. We need another FDR. Martin, thank you for the call. Arthur in Malden, Mass. Am I saying that right, Arthur?
No, it's Malden.
Malden, Mass.
Malden, Massachusetts.
Okay,
Hi.
Sorry about that.
Hi, I've been listening to your show since Air America, and just wanted to say thank you first off. But my vote is George W. Bush.
Mm-hmm. Because?
Well, I was in the Army for 9 years, and I had to go to Iraq.
Mm.
And I just want to remind people that, hundreds of thousands of people died because of George W. Bush's invasion.
Perhaps even millions. I mean, the official number is
right.
500,000, but I think that's wildly undercounted.
I agree. And, George W. Bush's popularity during his first year was a lot higher than Donald Trump's. I just want to remember that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 9/11 helped him, and he exploited 9/11 like a real demagogue. I mean, he could have mobilized the countries around the world to use the international police agencies like Interpol to find and arrest Osama bin Laden. In fact, Mullah Omar of Afghanistan, who ran Afghanistan, offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George W. Bush said, no, we'd rather bomb the crap out of your country. Thank you very much. It'll be very profitable for the military-industrial complex, and I get to be a war president, and I get to sound, tough and muscular, which is, the whole, all these people in the GOP, that's what they just love, tough, muscular presidents. It's so sad. Arthur, excellent point. Thank you. Dan in Huntsville, Alabama. Dan, your vote?
Hey, Tom. Well, it's tough. They all are so bad, but, Reagan, it has to be Reagan, because without him, I don't think it'd be Trump, like some of the callers said. Plus, Trump will come and go, and all those Reagan statues will still be there.
Yeah.
It's like, the Truman one was interesting to me because things in the past have a little bigger effect in the future. Like if we'd have had Medicare for all for 100 years, this would be a totally different country.
Yeah.
But Reagan, to me, with Trump in the future, Trump will come and go, and they're going to still be Reagan the God, and that's the...
And that's a really important point, by the way, the stickiness of things. Germany first got single-payer health care in the 1880s, and which is why Hitler didn't take it down. It's why, it's why Germany still has, well, they've got a modified version of it now. I mean, Helmut Kohl really messed with it more than anybody else. But, still, health care is a right, not a privilege in Germany, and has been since the 1880s. In Canada, Tommy Douglas gave Canada single-payer health care. And, he's to this day revered as the most famous of Canadians. So those what may seem at the time to be relatively small accomplishments are really, really huge over time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well said, Dan. Thanks a lot for the call.